few words each night. Whatever language you write in, it deserves respect. So don't expect subs to fix everything. Often, I've heard some of you complain, subs change the meaning of things. The better you write, the less likely they'll mess with your copy. It's not their name on it in the end. And by the way, subs are great, but they can only do so much with bad copy. And yes, a journalist also needs to be unafraid of controversy, even brave. Many won't like what you do, especially when it involves exposure of wrongdoing, and nobody in their right mind would become a journalist because they want to be popular. The public is not stupid. They know a good journalist from a bad one. And we have to accept that the mistrust that is built up around the media globally is only partly due to the digital or social media tsunami, whichever way you want to put it, the economic downturn, and the COVID pandemic. A lot has to do with the fact that people have lost faith in us due to shoddy and careless reporting. Recently, the Presidential Press Secretary took issue with my saying, journalism also speaks truth to power. But it does, and I stand by that. On all sorts of levels, you're required to be the checks and balances, especially when you're a political journalist. And if we didn't speak truth to power by being the watchdogs, there would only be propaganda from governments, from business interests, to political parties, you name it. They've all got an agenda, and it's our job to ask the questions. Quality journalism is about facts and trying to get to the truth of the matter. It's key to earning the public trust, no matter on what platform, whether it's print or online. This, if I may say, should form the bedrock of your new union. A union fights to protect the social and professional rights of journalists, and it's also a collective voice to improve pay and conditions and fairness in the workplace. And Jemima has mentioned some of the situations that exist here. But a union is only as good as its membership, so better journalists and media workers make better unions. Demand excellence of all in your ranks and campaign for high standards of professionalism. And always remember that good journalism is the best antidote there can be for disinformation. As I finalize my book, which talks about 40 years in journalism, more than 40 years, I'm struck by the horrible conditions in which I started out in 1976. Not only was I working for a misogynistic editor who made me work 12 and more hours a day, swore at me, belittled me for being a woman, who dared to want to do a man's job, even threw a typewriter at me. But I earned a pittance and no benefits. I had a bad car accident once on my way to a political meeting one night when a kudu leapt out of the darkness, and with a mangled leg and bleeding head, I didn't go to a hospital or a doctor. I couldn't afford it, and the company wouldn't pay either. They were more worried about the car. I healed eventually, and that's the way we rolled in those days. But I girded my loins, took the abuse, resolved to learn through this baptism of fire, and promised I'd show him one day, and I did. When I became an editor myself many years later, I would do everything that was in my power to ensure that journalists did not have to work in the kind of conditions that I did, and that they were decently remunerated with good benefits once the newspaper could afford them. I never forgot my roots as a young journalist, but I wouldn't want any of you to experience what I did, neither should you. So your union is important to fight for fairness and for rights. It must also be borne in mind, though, in the background, that sustainability of traditional media in particular is, at the moment, tenuous at best. Journalists have a very important role in trying to turn that back around. With your commitment to quality journalism and love of the craft, you can also help to put good journalism back to where it should be in people's hearts, so that once again they buy those newspapers, subscribe online, listen to your radio programs. And your reward at the end of the day, let me not kid you, you probably won't ever become rich unless you're the owner of a lucrative media house. But hopefully you'll be decently paid and you'll be able to rise in the ranks. I always say that if you love what you do, it doesn't seem like work. You want to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I've been a good, ethical citizen, and I've been there for my people. Because that is, after all, why we do what we do. The fact that you've all initiated this union shows that you care. That's a really good start. We're fortunate, I think, to call ourselves still a democracy. Things may not always be great, but they're better than most of our colleagues working under draconian regimes, some of these on our own subcontinent. We must never forget them, and solidarity with journalists everywhere is a must. So is the never completely won right to press freedom. You all know that a lot of you took part in the recent demonstrations on impunity against journalists, and that was a marvelous act of solidarity with our colleagues in other parts of the world who were jailed, arrested, detained, harassed, and even killed. Things, even here, can change for the worse at any moment, so let's all keep the faith. Work together with other advocacy organizations as well. For example, the Action Coalition, which has been banging the drum for an access to information law for a few years, which will also hopefully diminish secrecy and improve your lives as working journalists and make it easier for you to do your jobs. Second to last, some of us have been there, done that, but don't relegate us to the dustbin of history without milking us of all our experience and our expertise. We're here to help if we can. As the saying goes, journalism will kill you, but it will also keep you alive while you're doing it. Finally, I'd like to pay tribute to you all, not only for taking the initiative to start a union, but you guys are in the front lines, whether the world chooses to acknowledge this or not. And especially, but not only, during this COVID pandemic. Journalism is often a thankless task, and you're putting yourselves at risk to inform others. So please, give yourself a big hand for that, and all the best of luck for your deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Now, as you know that we are here today, one of the biggest things that we're doing today is to elect the leadership for the union. But before we do that, the reason why we have our speakers is basically for them